The European Green Deal is a policy statement of the European Commission that outlines the European strategy for dealing with climate emergency over the next 30 years. The goal is to reach CO2 neutrality by 2050, and it is going to be the most important action plan in Europe over the next decades. Climate change has been on the international policy agenda for 30 years, and CO2 emissions keep increasing because no country respects the commitments. The reason for this lack of engagement is that all the past protocols and agreements were not legally binding and did not include effective sanctions. This Green Deal is different. The main element is the climate law, an act that will enshrine CO2 neutrality in legislation. This is an important step because legislation is binding and typically includes sanctions. Sanctions worked well in the past. A good example is when the world worked together for the environment and signed the Montreal Protocol in 1987 for reducing the ozone hole that ever since is slowly decreasing. That protocol included trade sanctions. It is too early to say if the Green Deal will work. The statement released on December 11 is a draft. Decision-making in the EU is complex, and it also involves the European Council and the European Parliament. The three parties need to agree on the statement first, and then make it operational with regulations and financing mechanisms. This is a long process, but they must move on quickly. Will climate warming decelerate if the Green Deal is applied at full extent? As things are today, the answer is no. Today, EU CO2 emissions are about 9% of global emissions, and this percentage is decreasing. If China and India do not engage in an effective, clear and quick action for reducing emissions, global temperatures will continue increasing and we will not reach the targets of the Paris Agreement. The EU can and should influence China and India. The EU has the moral obligation to use diplomacy and trade agreements for the reduction of global CO2 emissions. This is also clearly stated in the Green Deal.